Welcome to the Community Development Podcast, a podcast dedicated to community development practice and approaches, sharing our learning and connecting the workforce. My name is Russell. So, welcome to episode 39. My name is Russell, and I have the very great pleasure of a returning guest, possibly the first time anyone has made a second appearance. I'm not quite sure. It's Becky Harford, just across Cardiff from me, from where I'm sitting. How are you, Becky? Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me again. It was ages ago I was last on. Was it like 2018 or something?
2018. Yeah, way back when. Not much has happened in the 5 years since then.
No. Yeah, it's been exactly the same.
Yeah, well, other than tipping the world upside down. We were talking about a project that you were or had relatively recently founded at the time, called Benthyg, which is the Welsh word for to borrow, for the verb to borrow. And at that point, it was pretty much sort of just one pin in the map in Wales, close to home where you were living at that point. And in the 5 years since then, it's flourished, it's grown, it's expanded. We're going to sort of revisit, basically, the project and the last 5 years and what's happened in the meantime. Maybe explore a little bit about what you think has perhaps driven that expansion. And some of that might relate to some of the other things that were going on in the world. But by way of recap, do you want to say a little bit about yourself and give, by way of introduction?
So, yeah, I'm Becky Harford. I'm director and co-founder of Benthyg Cymru. At the time when we spoke, we were Benthyg Borrow Don't Buy. We weren't yet Benthyg Cymru. So my background, I've done a bit of everything. I was a waitress for years and years and years and worked in shops, waitressing, that kind of thing. And then in 2015, I got involved with local library campaigning, and following on from that, co-founded Rumney Forum, which was where the first Benthyg was, because it was all to do with the libraries closing down and we wanted to keep them in use. I like to start things. I like to be an instigator of stuff. So using my background in community development, activism, I've recently working for Friends of the Earth, supporting the local groups with their campaigning. So I've done a bit of campaigning, done a bit of activism, done a bit of communications and some community development. So that is the foundation of what I've been doing and where I come from.
We'd known each other for a while and sort of lost touch maybe a little bit. And then I'd kind of reached out because I'd heard about this concept of a library of things, which is so easy to understand in some respects, so obvious, so obviously a good idea, but doesn't exist in many places. I mean, there's a mission to increase those number of places, of course. What is a library of things? If someone isn't familiar with that concept, what would be the sort of like the elevator pitch then?
So it's a place where you can borrow things you need but don't own, and donate things that you own but don't need. So if you think about things which maybe are too big to fit in your house, or maybe you can't afford and you wouldn't use very often. So our most borrowed items are things like carpet cleaners, pressure washers, gazebos, stuff like that. So it's stuff that like I said, you can't afford or haven't got space for, but there's also an element of if you want to try something new, like a new hobby, you can borrow the stuff, try it out. So in North Wales, in the Petha libraries of things, they've got like art kits that you can go away and try, or cooking kits you can go away and try. So it's just trying to stuff in use for as long as possible and democratize stuff, so we've all got access to the stuff that we need when we need it, wherever we are.
Yeah, that D word, that democratized word is something we tend to hear about a lot in community development, in perhaps respect to things like participation and decision making and things like that, but actually the access to things, access to public space, for example, the concept of the commons. This is just a variation on that, which is something that probably took me a while to kind of get my head around, to think of these items that are commodities, are things that we go out and buy, and with Christmas coming up tends to be very much an emphasis on spending money that we don't necessarily have to hand and putting on the plastic on the never. This concept of democratizing access to white goods, kitchen equipment, art sets, etc., gazebos. In many respects, that goes against the grain of the last sort of 40, 50, 60 years of how we consume things as a society. It's really quite profound, actually.
But, it's I remember my nan telling me stories about this goes back, but like how there'd be like one phone on the street, and if anybody needed to use the phone, they'd go to their neighbour with the phone. And I think we used to do it as a society, and it's just in relatively recent history that we're not sharing stuff, and the emphasis has been on stigma. If you don't own it, then you're not somehow good enough. But it's trying to pull that back and go, actually, but there's so much stuff. Let's share it. There's nothing wrong with sharing it. It's better for you. It's better for the planet. Why aren't we doing that more? But obviously, we're kind of fighting against a huge corporate machine. So that's where we're at, really, is trying to change that mindset of people. Actually, it's okay to share this stuff. We can do that and still feel like we've got something and we have that stuff and we can try this stuff out.
There was one at the time when we last chatted for this. What's happened? Where are you at now, and what has perhaps driven that, do you think?
Whirlwind, I'll tell you that for nothing. During our time in Rumney, we'd got some landfill tax funding from WCVA, and we did that to employ somebody there at the Benthyg Borrow Don't Buy in Rumney, and part of that was to create a toolkit. So all our processes, basically how to do it, what you need to do it, was part of that project. So at the end of that project, we then had this toolkit. Me, Jane and Ella, the three co-founders, we'd always wanted to trial it out and then do the toolkit and then share that with the rest of Wales, basically. Anybody who wanted to set up a library of things in their community. And it was always really important to us that we know that every community is different, and we wanted to make sure that we had just a toolkit that people could take that and then set up a library of things in their community which fitted in with their community. And what I mean by that is maybe they're a urban community with a local community garden, and they start off with the tools for the community garden, something like that. So it fits in with what people need where they are. And then in 2020, we then incorporated as a CIC and became Benthyg Cymru. And from then, it was an absolute whirlwind. During this time, I can't remember exactly when it was released, but there was the new Welsh Government programme, and during that there was in the programme of government, there's a promise, I suppose, to open 80 repair and reuse hubs in Wales. And there's also the Beyond Recycling strategy. We were mentioned in the Beyond Recycling strategy as a way to kind of reach the goals in that strategy. Things were on our side at this time. People were really interested in the concept. We actually incorporated in November 2020. So this was like halfway through the pandemic. So that was very interesting. So we've incorporated with the aim of setting up a network using our toolkit to support anybody in Wales who wanted to set up their own library of things in their community. And within that first year, I think we supported something like 12 communities. And at this time, Ella was the only full-time worker for Benthyg, and I was still working at Friends of the Earth. And it was a really intense period of growth. Calmed down somewhat now, but we got more staff and stuff. But that's where we are now.
So it's interesting. It's a combination of some relatively localised funding in the sense that you need to be within a certain radius of a landfill site. That helps. You've got national governmental strategies and priorities being articulated in manifestos. You've got people working their socks off at that hyper-local level as well.
Yeah.
It goes to show, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not everything is identical in terms of the expansion and development of movements of organisations, but it's happening at different scales, isn't it? That development that's pushed the organisation along.
Well, it was something in the ether with that growth. There was a real sense of people wanted to do it, and it seemed like we had all the inquiries at one time, and like it was trying to harness that potential that people were really interested in, and making it work for everyone. So it was a really interesting time, actually. I think we're on 22 libraries of things in Wales now, which are all part of the network. As far as I'm aware, I don't think there's anybody in Wales doing a library of things which is not in the network. So we're the only ones in the world doing that, I think, where we're taking a networked approach. So we really want people to be able to borrow whatever they want, wherever they are in Wales, and supporting the network is key to that goal, really.
But it does need those local people to get involved. I mean, that's the the necessary kind of ingredient, is it, within any networked approach. If there's Benthyg Cymru operating across that national scale, having the ear of government, etc., knowledge of funders and things like that. But actually, it can't just be parachuted. It can't just drop into a community. It can't just be taken off the shelf, ready-made. It's got to bind on to something that's kind of happening locally, that appetite, as you said, people getting involved, making the inquiries. As I said, it's a fairly relatively simple concept, but of course it's going against generations worth of wider kind of cultural attachment to owning things and buying things, as we touched on. To what extent do we find that, yes, you have those people locally who kind of get it, in air quotes? How efficiently does the message or the concept cascade out to other people, do you find, in your experience?
Every single person that you speak to, you will find very few who will say it's a bad idea. So in people's imaginations, it's a really brilliant idea and everybody gets it straight away. It's not a difficult concept to understand. You can borrow the stuff that you need. Sometimes it doesn't translate into people going out and actually borrowing the stuff, although we are seeing an increase in people wanting to borrow year on year. So it's really hard to compare, month by month, because there's busier periods and busier seasons. Our summers tend to be the busiest across the network. But we are seeing like year on year. So I have got some figures actually, because we've created a database where we can measure the carbon and cost savings across the whole network. So in the 2 years, October 2021 to the 30th September 23, that across the network has been nearly 10,000 borrows. That's quite a lot of borrows, which translates into £200,000 savings, like money savings. And then the carbon savings is about just nearly 100 tonnes of CO2 emissions. So these are estimates, but that's quite a lot of people borrowing for a small country. So we just want to build on that, really.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 prongs on our strategy. It's accessibility, awareness, and sustainability. And I think the accessibility thing is something that we are looking to get a grip on with the systems that we use, and making it really easy for people to know where their library of things is and be able to access it. So I sometimes compare it to Amazon. Like, I just want it to be where you can press a button and then you can either get something delivered or know when you can go and collect something. It's really close to your house, within that idea of, the 15-minute cities as well, where you can just everything you want is within like a 15-minute walk. So that's a really key element of our strategy, is that accessibility for people. And then obviously with the number of borrows, and it's the awareness. How do we make people more aware that this is a thing that they want to do? And this all ties in with behaviour change stuff. It's like we're trying to nudge people in the direction of thinking, actually, do I need to borrow that? Do I need to just click a button on Amazon? Or can I walk to my local library of things and borrow that and support the local community, reduce my consumption? And actually, I haven't got to have something gathering dust in the corner of my garage or in my attic, or if you've got a small flat just in your hallway,
Absolutely, and as I said, it's such a simple concept in some ways, but it is going against some of those things that's hardwired into us in lots of ways. In terms of, say, 15-minute city kind of concept, when I came over to visit you in Rumney that time back in 2018, Rumney's a community in sort of like the east of a fairly large city. What if someone's listening to this and they're in a rural community where the concept of a 15-minute city is far less relevant? How do rural communities get involved in this movement?
So this is one of the things that we kind of learned in the pandemic, actually, because we couldn't give people access to the stuff indoors. So we were looking, this is when we got our first electric van, and that was in Cardiff. Thanks to Cardiff Council, it was a partnership project with Repair Cafe Wales, and the idea was we take the repair and the stuff to people. Through that, we developed a mobile toolkit. I would say that there is significant challenges, between urban and rural, and obviously that 15-minute city concept doesn't work if you're in like rural North Wales or wherever you happen to be, but it's definitely on our radar. There's actually in Denbighshire, there's Bus Benthyg, which is not something that we run ourselves, but they're part of the network. They're run by an amazing CIC up there called Resource, and they've got like a mobile, it's an old Macmillan cancer van, and they go to different parts because it's quite rural, so they'll go around and they've actually got the items inside the van. So there's a couple of options if you are rural. There's having the actual something like Bus Benthyg, or having delivery from a static site. We're working on the systems to allow us to do that in a much more way that makes sense and saves time and money in it. So it's definitely something that we think about and are trying to develop and understand.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, a mobile library of books is not an alien concept to
No.
people in rural communities, or indeed people outside rural communities. They'll understand that. So yeah, so Benthyg and the mobile van, again, it's not rocket science, is it? Really, in many respects. Interesting that you
No.
mentioned that it's a local authority in Cardiff that has worked strategically with you to make that van available. We mentioned government previously. I mean, what about, I don't know, housing providers, for example? What potential benefit is this concept of a library of things, and how Benthyg operates as a network to maybe a large housing association, a large social housing provider who has a duty of care, as it were, for its tenants and residents?
Yeah, so that's always been something that we've thought about and wanted to support, be involved with. An example I can give you is another partnership project is our remake shop in Newport, which is on Skinner Street in Newport on the high street. So it's a high street repair and reeve shop. We think is Wales's first, but don't hold me to that. And that was in partnership with a housing association. But they have above the shop on Skinner Street, they've got housing association flats, and the idea was that the shop underneath the library of things and the repair space would be, really convenient and for those tenants to use. It's an amazing place in Newport. I'd really encourage anyone to go there. They're doing so well there. It's making money. It's like a real community hub. But like it's grown organically and it's great. And those tenants, I don't think they've moved in yet, but that was always the idea. So it's as with anything in the third sector, it always takes twice as long as you think it's going to take. So we're still on the journey with that. And also we've been in Remake, they've been looking at referral schemes. So if somebody can't afford something or whatever the reason is, maybe the housing association can refer to Benthyg Cymru or their library of things, or refer to Get Fixed. So that idea of the maybe not social prescribing, but that idea that you can get a referral to go there. So it's highlighting that as a service for people. People borrow stuff for different reasons. So it's not just, oh, if you can't afford it. That's why my personal journey to it was because I couldn't afford a lawnmower, and I thought amazing if you could borrow it from a library, and because I was involved in the library campaigning. But it's not just people like me, it's people who are worried about consumerism. So there's no stigma attached to it. It's not like, oh, you're poor, you need to go and borrow something. It's like, no, this is like a community service. I'd really say in this day and age with cost of living and stuff, it's a really necessary service rather than just like a nice to have. And I think that's what we need people to realise and get on board with. Actually, this is like an essential service and should be seen maybe as a service rather than just something nice to have.
Yeah, you mentioned a bit earlier this sense that it's about extending the life of things. So things that people own but they don't need, clearly too good for landfill. They don't want to be fussed with, selling on Facebook or whatever it might be. Keeping it local and still, of course, available for them to use on the odd occasion they want to use it. Obviously,
Yeah.
This concept of the circular economy, isn't it? Where we try to extend the life of things, all sorts of different things, electrical items, white goods, tools, that kind of thing. Again, that's a concept that's kind of growing, but we've also heard of the foundational economy, and we've heard of these concepts of degrowth and a solidarity economy. So somebody who's working maybe in a fairly middle of the road, in air quotes, role in community development, and they're working with local people, and they'll be involved in, I don't know, play facilities and youth clubs and services for older people and some low level and maybe environmental work. Is there a danger, playing devil's advocate a little bit here, is there a danger all of these different kind of economic concepts feel a little bit abstract, they feel a bit remote from what they're doing? What would be the appeal to, or what would be the call to action then, is a better way of putting it, to a community development worker who's listening to this thinking, this is a good idea, but where do I start? What relevance does that have to my work on this estate I'm based on, or in this neighbourhood I'm working in?
The possibilities are actually limitless for stuff like that. I mean, if, for an example, if you're working in an old people's home and you want to have a party and you want to have a karaoke machine and some lights and make it a bit special, why would you spend money on buying that and having somewhere to store it? Why wouldn't you borrow it from a library of things and have a nice party for your residents? Or equally, if you're working with the youth service, what about having if you need to do an event or something like that? There's really, it's to do with what you can imagine. What do your service users need and want? What are you supporting them with? What do they need? And a lot of the time, stuff can be put into a library of things and borrows when you need it. It's not, um, everybody knows what it's like in third sector or public sector. There's no space for anything. There's like, oh, can I borrow a berea cupboard to put this in or whatever? There's nowhere to store anything. So I think looking on it as a resource for them as well is the way to think about it. It's like we're providing you with items which maybe you haven't got funding to afford, and we're always looking for partnership projects as well. Like I've just been talking to somebody in Cardiff actually, and they run they call neurospicy play dates. So they're for people with ADHD or any autism, so neurodivergent people. And we're looking at getting some art supplies to keep in the Benthyg there that can be used for these. They're called like neurospicy play dates, so like a lino press or things that can be reused, but they've got nowhere to store them because they're just like pop up sessions, like once a week or whatever. So stuff like that. It's all happening, and I would encourage people to just try it out. Obviously, we've got our toolkit, and if people are just interested in the idea and they can't envision how it would work, just get in contact with us. We've got 2 development officers. We've got somebody covering North and West Wales, Welsh speaker, and then South Wales. We've got development officer in South Wales, and obviously yourself, Russ, who's covering Cardiff. I'm sure they can come to you if they're in Cardiff to chat about the possibilities.
Worlds collide. Yeah, I'll be honest, I was genuinely so impressed by, one, the simplicity of the idea, but also, what's the word, dumbfounded at the same time as to why is something so simple not so readily available. That I'd kept that sort of watching brief. Obviously, things like the pandemic kind of disrupted an awful lot of things. Another one opened up sort of a bit closer to where I live in Cardiff than the one in Rumney that I visited at Ely, or in Ely, at ACE Action in Cairo and Ely. Kimberly, who's now left ACE, joined the podcast about 18 months ago, talking about their bereavement cafe project, their grief space project over there, which was a phenomenal project, and again, it's such a simple idea. So signed up to that, and cut a long story short, here I am trying to push the idea out of the nest a little bit more in Cardiff, and as you said, there's other people working with across Wales, and certainly I'm finding very much what you've said on a day-to-day basis. Mention this to people, and people kind of go, what a good idea, what a simple idea. But there's a little bit of an inertia in there in terms of then actually taking those next steps. And I think that's where community development really can add value to it. I mean, there's lots of ways in which it can, but it's kind of mobilising people. And once you've mobilised, 1 or 2, then a third becomes a little bit easier, and then maybe a fourth and a fifth get on board. And then when people who are those local champions get involved, and it has that visibility as well, that's the other thing. So again, when you get that point about the stigma that you referred to, it isn't a service for, in air quotes, poor people only. Anybody can get involved, whatever their motivation and benefit. But that visibility, I think, reduces that potential stigma should there be on the part of some people. So I think there is a role for old-fashioned traditional community development, and that was one of the things that appealed to me when the role was made available, and I heard about it because it was an opportunity to get a little bit of dirt under the fingernails, I suppose.
It's fundamentally about people, isn't it? And showing people that they can do this is what it's about, isn't it? And showing people that this is, like you say, it's not just for one type of people. This is for everyone. And being on the ground and speaking to people is the best way of doing that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned the toolkit.
Yeah, so the toolkit is actually just for network members, but it's free to be a network member. And so then it'll be free to access the toolkit. We do, so we've got like 3 tiers. Our toolkit is born of blood, sweat and tears, if you like. We've made all the mistakes. So I'd really encourage you, if you are thinking of it, if someone's listening now thinking, oh, I'd like to get involved with this, get in contact with us, either via the website, actually on the contact form, it'll be like, I'm interested in starting a library of things. And then somebody will get in contact with you, and then we can sign you up to the network. We'll see where you are first. We've got like a triage kind of system. We'll see where you are with things, and then advise you, show you the toolkit, etc., etc. Further to that, if you're just at that kind of stage, or you just want that level of involvement, we can go up to all the way to managing a project for you. So we're here to kind of support what the needs of where you are, what you need where you are. So if you're like a local authority, we can, support you through that. If you're a small hyperlocal organisation, we can also support you. But the key thing is to come and chat with us so we can assess what the best thing is to support you with, basically.
Because that is a key message, isn't it? There's not a one-size-fits-all library of things model that every community can get hold of. It very much needs to suit the geography, demography, that local fabric of community organisations that exist, who's already maybe engaged in things to do with circular economy, or involved with repair cafes, or involved with other activities contributing to sort of sustainable living and things like that, and reducing carbon. So yeah, that not a one-size-fits-all message is key, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got Pether in North Wales is run by a group of different community organisations. One of them, I think, the lead partner is Partner Ogwen up in the north, but they're actually cited in public libraries there. So the libraries manager is really interested in spreading that concept to more public libraries. So we've got them in public libraries. We've got like Bus Benthyg, I've already mentioned. Splot is in a shipping container on a community site with community gardens, etc. So really, you can do it where you are. There's a few key considerations that you need to kind of think about, but we take you through them. They're like space. Have you got the space? Have you got the people? There's like insurance, there's safety. So there are a few kinds of key things that we'll talk through with you. But we've been there and we've done that, and we can definitely help.
Yeah. And wearing the T-shirt to prove it.
Yeah.
There's a Christmas campaign coming up, Magic Moments Don't Cost the Earth, and it's very much around encouraging people, almost giving them permission a little bit, I suppose, to not feel obliged to have to spend a huge amount of money in the run-up to Christmas, over Christmas, whether that's on presents, gifts, all of the other trimmings, food. For all the talk this week and last in the UK with a UK government budget announcement, inflation is falling. Inflation on food is still remaining stubbornly high, and that's something we all buy and consume a lot of at Christmas. And it's very much around encouraging people to spend time and invest in time. And within that is a trying to develop this culture of borrowing, but to spend time rather than spending money that they may not have, or is going to be on the never. It's on a credit card to be paid off over the next 12 months. Well, interest rates are pretty much the only tool that the government has in which to tackle high inflation. So there's a danger you're going to get squeezed whichever way you do it, but it's to encourage people to say, well, listen, do you know what, we don't have to do it this way, we can do it a different way, to perhaps the alternative. But again, it's going against stuff that's almost very much hardwired into us, societally speaking, isn't it? It's not a small task that the campaign is looking to set itself, is it really?
Look, I'm like everybody else. I go into the supermarket at Christmas and I come home and I'm like, how have I spent all this money? And then at the end of Christmas, I'm like chucking stuff away, and I just, the guilt about it. So it's not about making your whole Christmas like a really simple Christmas. Still, it's more about the message of just try one thing. Maybe it's, instead of buying a karaoke machine for when your friends and family come over, you borrow one instead. So it's not about saying you can't buy anything this Christmas, you can't do this. It's not about like stopping people. It's more about saying, why don't you try this? Try borrowing some board games instead of buying them. Toy shops sell all these board games. Where do they all go? Where are all the board games gone? How are people still selling them?
A shelf. Under the stairs.
Yeah, they're on the shelves. Search on our website to find your nearest library of things, and then you can have a look on their catalogue. They'll send you a link. There'll be a link on our website to your nearest library of things, and I'm linked to their catalogue, and you can have a little look. And most of them have got like a party section. You can have a look in there, or maybe if you've got friends coming over, or anything like that, you need some extra cooking utensils, even stuff like that. You can borrow instead of having to buy again. So yeah, it's about those magic moments and trying to make them about people, not things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not preaching about having a parsimonious Christmas on the part of people. It's about being celebratory. It's about spending time and some money if on treats and things like that. But it's about, okay, there might be some alternative ways to the Christmas that has become the norm for people, and so hopefully that'll resonate.
Stressful trying to have this like perfect Christmas. And I think a lot of this, there's a lot of stress that people are under to have this image of the John Lewis Christmas, and it's just not true. Even if you can afford it, Christmas is just not like that, So it's trying to just, for myself included, and talking to myself, don't get sucked in by it. Let's try and just take a step back and maybe borrow some stuff instead of buying it, and see where we are and see if it works, and let's do it together.
So if you're a community worker listening to this, maybe one of the small asks would be to visit the website, look maybe more locally if you're outside of Wales, indeed outside of the UK, look locally to see what you've got, but maybe then consider what your role could be, maybe as a catalyst to kind of bring some people together, to have those conversations, to legitimise the idea, to make it something that people sit up and pay attention to. And who knows, there could be one or two people that are really, really keen on running with it, so that it's not ending up being another task, another project on your plate. And it could be something that brings some other people maybe who you aren't aware of, who aren't engaging in your community work activity to date, to get involved, because it's something that really kind of motivates them. And as you said, it's starting with the people, start with what motivates them, start with what matters. And I think that the broad appeal that this have, it's around saving space, getting rid of items that you don't need. Yes, it's about saving money, so not buying things that we don't need with money that we don't have to impress people we don't know, or maybe even like. Helping to save the planet as well, extending the life of things, keeping them out of landfill, reducing the consumption of carbon. It's got a socioeconomic, it's got a anti-consumerist, it's got a sustainable living, an environmental angle to it. There can't be many people for whom there isn't something that is a primary kind of motivation. And that in itself is rare when you're looking at projects, initiatives, to have such a potential broad appeal for people. Loved it to date, the couple of months been involved. Really looking forward to staying on the journey with you all. And hopefully in 5 years' time, are we going to set ourselves a target when we get together around this microphone? How many will there be then in Wales and the world?
Yeah. I was speaking to a guy from who runs an organisation in Newport, and he's from Zimbabwe, and he does like cultural kinds of exchanges. And he was like, "Oh, could we do this in Zimbabwe?" And I was like, "Yes, you could definitely do this in Zimbabwe. Let's meet up." So who knows? We might have one in Zimbabwe in 5 years' time.
Okay, well, there we go. I know we've got some listeners in Kenya. I'd have to go back into the dashboard to see whether we get many listens in Zimbabwe. But certainly in terms of the IACD, and we've done a couple of episodes with the IACD, the International Association of Community Development. I know Daniel Moyer there. He's based in Nairobi. We have some contacts in southern Africa more broadly. So maybe that would be one to be talking about in 5 years' time at the very least. Becky, I'm really grateful for your time. Drop a load of contacts and things in the show notes, but is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up and let you carry on with your day?
No, really thank you to be here, and I would really just, if anybody's interested in the idea or the concept, we're a friendly lot and we'd love you to get in contact, even if it's just for a chat. Maybe sign up to our newsletter. You can do that via the website, and just try and borrow something this year.
Thank you for listening to the Community Development Podcast. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at CommDevT COMMDEVT podcast. And to support the podcast and help it share learning, connect the workforce, and raise the profile and the merits of community development approaches, why not become a Patreon at patreon.com/the CD podcast.